sparked by Donald Trump. It threatens to send shockwaves through the U.S. economy and the world's economies. The market's reacting to Donald Trump's ongoing onslaught of personal attacks and smears on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. All three major stock indices experiencing major losses today. The Dow Jones down more than 900 points. The cause? The dangerous one-man game of chicken that Donald Trump is playing with the job of the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. Shortly after markets opened today, Donald Trump called on Powell to cut interest rates and called him a, quote, major loser, end quote. That smear came on the heels of Kevin Hassett, Donald Trump's director for the National Economic Council, telling reporters on Friday while markets were closed that the Trump administration is looking at possible ways to fire Jerome Powell. Powell has said in public on camera that he cannot be fired by Donald Trump. He has said that publicly. But the ongoing attacks and this direct attack on the institution that undergirds the entire American and, by extension, world economies, the institution that investors here and around the world look to and trust, is leading to fears of a deepening economic crisis. New York Times reports this, quote, the U.S. dollar continued its slide against nearly every other major currency. It fell about 1% against the euro on Monday to the lowest in more than 3 years. The dollar also fell against the Japanese yen to its lowest level since September. The trend is even more stark against some other currencies. The dollar at its lowest it has been against the Swiss franc in more than a decade. Here's how our friend and colleague Steve Leisman put it earlier today.
This is what you get. I mean, somebody needs to turn to the camera and tell the president to stop. I mean, he is messing with the foundation of this country. He's messing with the foundation of the economy. He's messing with America's place in the global financial system. Where's Jamie Dimon and David Solomon and Brian Moynihan? Where are the leaders of our financial community calling on the president to stop this business about trying to fire the Fed chair? And you see what you get here in the markets, right? I think these people they're the leaders of the financial community. They have a ton at stake, and I think they have to step up.
Right there, what you just saw is where we start today with Steve Leisman, CNBC senior economics reporter. Over to you. I mean, where are those people? And I've been asking this story from a political chair in which I sit, seeing the incoming instability, chicken isn't the right analogy because Jerome Powell isn't playing chicken. He's doing his job. But Trump is playing chicken with something even bigger than the markets, with the global economy, with the country, with our place in the world. Why aren't those folks speaking up?
Well, I think they fear the president. I mean, you've seen the way he's gone after the legal firms. He's gone after the universities. They don't want him to go out. Look, they have a lot at stake. I don't judge them, but it just strikes me that at some point, somebody with some authority has to step up and say, this is not the way to do things. I mean, look, Nicole, this was another day in financial markets in Trump's America. He turned around and he hit the ball squarely into his own goal. And he scored another own goal. This did not have to happen today. We ended up down 900 and something points on the Dow Jones. We were off as much as 1,200. And it really looks directly related to his comments and fears that the president is going to potentially fire the Fed chair. We don't know if that's going to happen. Some people put a low probability on it. But let me see if I can connect this to the things that you report on all day long, which is not necessarily the financial markets, but what's going on with the Supreme Court, what's going on with the legal firms, what's going on with Harvard and these other schools. There are things that the president has done that nobody ever thought a president would do. And that's why in financial markets, you cannot dismiss some probability that the president will fire the Fed chair. People say, oh, it's not going to happen. I said, well, we thought he was going to follow the Supreme Court. We thought he was not going to necessarily withhold X billions of dollars from Harvard. So it's all of the same piece in that you cannot relax and you cannot bet on a team where the captain is hitting the ball into his own net.
Steve, let me try to connect the questions you asked to the questions I've asked for 9 years. I mean, Why not Jamie Dimon? And I will judge him in this context. I would never question his economic acumen, right? Not my expertise. I come and I speak to you with all the humility I can muster. But as an American, why not ask every corner of our country to want the best for the whole country? And if you destroy the economy, you destroy the first person Donald Trump promised to help, the forgotten man and woman. Why not judge Jamie Dimon for not doing more to stand up for the forgotten men and women who are the whole reason we're here? Donald Trump so effectively communicated with them going back to 2015. Why not ask Jamie Dimon to do more for them?
Well, I obviously think they ought to be stepping up. They ought to be talking. I guess the point I was making is these are regulated institutions, and this president, if he wants, can bring the hammer down on them. They have a responsibility to their shareholders. I'm not going to defend them. I think they do need to speak up, and I think if this goes any further, look, the thing that connects all of the things that were in the red today, and you read them, the dollar, bonds, and stocks, is people are selling U.S. assets. They're selling America. And we've talked about that before. And at some point, they need to step up and help put some kind of floor under this market, some kind of sense that there are people in this country with authority who will step up to protect essentially America's preeminent place in the globe when it comes to financial markets.
You know, Andrew Ross Sorkin sat here, and I like a dog with a bone. I could not let it go that what you're saying, what he was saying was true, that they're afraid, not necessarily just for themselves, but for the institutions they lead, the businesses they lead, and the shareholders to whom they are responsible. But I guess I want to ask you if that's changing, if they see Harvard taking a different approach and standing and fighting, if they see the 4 law firms that decided to fight Donald Trump's retribution and they see the court siding with them, are those stories being tracked closely? Are they being watched by the leaders of companies and the general counsels of companies? I mean, are they considering a more confrontational posture?
Not that I know of. I mean, I know I've talked to some of them on background, and their initial, before all this stuff with the Fed chair started, was to try to lay low, ride it out, and see if they could essentially get by unscathed. But I think you're making an interesting point, Nicole, that they're fast approaching a place where they're not going to be able to get by unscathed, where their share prices and all the things that they actually care about and the work that they do is not going to be, they cannot be immune from this. And at some point, they're going to have to step forward. I will point out, Nicole, that Congress has not shown much more spine than these bankers out there. So in terms of where I know some Democrats have spoken up, but in terms of the actual actions taken by Congress, they have not done anything. I know that there's been some attempt to do some behind the scenes work. I know that Scott Bessent, you read that story in the Wall Street Journal, where they had to wait for Peter Navarro to leave the room in order for Bessent and Lutnick to go in and get the president to annul his or to change his mind about his reciprocal tariffs. Well, if that's what's going on in the White House, it's kind of interesting to think about whether the bankers could even have some effect.
Well, look, that is the quintessential Trump story. I mean, the first time he left the country, advisors had to wait for other advisors to leave the room to sneak in America's affirmation to Article 5 and our NATO obligations into a speech. I mean, the Trump story is always some version of this, right? Bessent has to wait, and it's like third grade, right? You have to wait until the bully goes to the bathroom to get all the kids to stand on the side of the kid being bullied. I mean, it's the quintessential Trump story. And I guess I always come back to this curiosity about whether they're changing the way they look at Trump, whether it's no longer a set of policies, but a real desire to understand the psychology of Donald Trump and the people around him. Have they shifted the lens with which they're looking at Trump, or are they still trying to gird?
I think they're trying to keep on his good side because, as you remember, Nicole, they are trying to get the Federal Reserve and other bank regulators to loosen some of the regulations that came out of the great financial crisis And so they're hoping for that to come through. And I think that is something that is keeping them at bay, the hope that that will happen. And whether or not they speak up, I think they think there's some danger that they could put that reform that they're hoping for in danger if they come out and try to get the president to ease the rhetoric about the Fed chair. Look, I don't think it's an issue that well, it is, but we've kind of normalized this idea that the president is going to have his say on monetary policy. But the idea of him calling him a loser and toying with this idea of replacing him, that's what ends up creating or making a third world financial system or third world country out of the United States.
Is there a scenario where they think this passes? I mean, is there still wish casting, or do they take Donald Trump seriously? I
mean, that's for you to figure out. I think they would listen to you on that. It's the old seriously versus literally.
Nobody listens to me. Nobody in my house. Nobody listens. I guess what I'm really trying to ask is, are they hoping for the best still? Do they think he'll move on from Jerome Powell?
I think they are hoping for the best. I think, they're kind of dismissing it. But look, I mean, I'm getting messages from people, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. He's going to replace him. And I'm getting messages from people that say, nah, he would never do it. So, I mean, it's the old, like I guess, Nicole, they promised me there'd be no politics on this. It's the seriously versus literally idea.
Yeah.
I think that when we look at how these markets are trading, we see them trading with some probability. That's what I think what today's sell-off was about, that there could be a replacement of the Fed chair, and that would, as we've discussed, deeply undermine trust and faith in the U.S. capital system.